So that's a story about public officials misleading the public in a way I deeply care about. We now have a story about a public official misleading the public in a way I kind of don't care about, but it's really funny. Although I'm sad for Lloyd Austin. It sounds like he's still in the hospital.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the problems that the White House is facing, because the White House press corps has found itself a scandal, and it's got questions that it wants answered.
It is pretty absurd when you think about it.
It's really crazy. Like nobody would get away with this in a 6-person office.
No,
let alone.
Or in 1995, right? Like Bill Clinton, if this happens under his watch, like this is the story that is leading all of the networks. It is the headline. And I mean, obviously there are 2 wars going on right now. So in some ways that makes this story more important. In some ways it makes it less important. But the president seems to have not known that his defense secretary was undergoing serious medical treatment for a very serious condition.
Raises the question of whether it matters that anybody has their hand on the wheel. So let's put up this first element here. As part of Secretary Austin's, this is a statement, as part of Secretary Austin's routinely recommended health screening, he has undergone regular prostate surveillance. Changes in his lab evaluation in early December 2023 identified prostate cancer, which required treatment. December 22nd, he was admitted to Walter Reed Walter Reed and underwent a minimally invasive surgical procedure called a prostatectomy to treat and cure prostate cancer. It seemed to go fine. He went home. On January 1st, New Year's Day, he was admitted back to Walter Reed with complications from the December 22nd procedure, including nausea, severe abdominal, hip, and leg pain. An initial evaluation revealed a urinary tract infection. On January 2nd, the decision was made to transfer him to the ICU for close monitoring and a higher level of care. Now, they say that under no time during this was he sedated. Mm-hmm. And so you hear ICU and you think, all right, this guy's like in a coma. Like that's just how the public hears it.
Right.
He was getting intensive care, but he was not sedated, which seems to be the rationale that they would be relying on to say, well, okay, I was working from home.
Right.
I was working from the ICU, managing 2 wars from the ICU.
Yeah.
So the White House press corps, just battering the White House over this. I think we have John Kirby getting knocked around here.
We learned also today that Secretary Austin, when he went into the hospital for the first time on December 22nd, he knew he was going to be under general anesthesia. He knew he was going to be spending the night and transferred authority to his deputy secretary. Was the White House informed then that the authority was going to be transferred?
No.
So the president has known for, I guess, 5 days now that Secretary Austin was in the hospital, but he wasn't informed why?
He was not informed until last Friday that Secretary Austin was in the hospital. He was not informed until this morning that the root cause of that hospitalization was prostate cancer.
Is that because the White House knew and didn't inform the president, or because Secretary Austin chose not to share that with the president?
Nobody at the White House knew that Secretary Austin had prostate cancer until this morning, and the president was informed immediately after we were.
Okay. Last week, we learned that Jake Sullivan, I believe, found out about the fact that Secretary Austin was hospitalized on Thursday morning. So just want to clarify, are you saying the president found out a day later than the NSC did?
No, Jake was informed, our national security advisor was informed that Secretary Austin was in the hospital and had been for some time. He found out late Thursday afternoon, and he and the chief of staff, Mr. Zients, informed the president later that evening, early that evening, not long after they learned. They informed the president directly, Thursday evening.
So, Ryan, when you think about...
Didn't he say Friday first?
Yes. And so when you think about all of the operations that are happening every single day, every single hour, really, both in Ukraine and in Israel, I think this becomes less of a sort of Washington intrigue scandal and more of a serious one that raises, another question, which is, does anybody even care if Biden is in the loop on this? Austin actually saying, don't tell the guy because he's not running this administration. That's the real, that's the biggest question for me, is this just that people know that Biden isn't even doing anything, that it was crazy.
If that was the case, though, you'd at least tell the chief of staff,
right?
The White House chief of staff,
because they are doing it.
You would tell Jake Sullivan, you'd tell Tony Blinken, if somebody.
Although Jake Sullivan knew first, they did tell Jake Sullivan after a long time.
Because Jake was in a meeting, and he's like, "Where's Lloyd? What's going on? Where's Lloyd?
Where is he?"
And eventually, somebody's like, "Oh yeah, by the way, I guess he's in the hospital." I think it's his war crime alibi. So when he goes to The Hague, and I was in the ICU.
Yeah, you can't blame me for anything.
This is not me. I don't think that's going to fly because it's only a couple days. He was doing war crimes before it. He was supporting war crimes from the ICU, and he's still supporting war crimes. So.
But again, when you think about the decisions that are going through the Pentagon, high-level life and death decisions that are going through the Pentagon at an hourly basis, because there are now 2 wars happening, let alone all of the various conflicts around the world, but 2 hot conflicts right now that we are funding to a serious degree, and you think that you can just keep this quiet, keep this from the president for as long as you did. Something else is going on. That's not just that Lloyd Austin was, he's a very private person. He just didn't want the public. He didn't want it to leak to the public. He didn't want the president to worry about him. There's something else going on there.
But it's also a story that the White House press corps loves because there are answers that they can get, questions that they can ask. Yeah. And it's shorn of any kind of political valence. There's no substance. I mean, okay, yeah, there should be people running the show. There's substance there, but it's shorn of ideological substance, and they love the non-ideological stories.
Agree completely. Palace intrigue.
Right.
Personnel questions. There's nothing they love more than personnel.
Perfect personnel intrigue. Because you can say it matters because it does,
and you can look tough.
And you're gonna challenge the White House hard.
Right.
Ducey's question was funny. What kind of president is this, or something like that? It's all right. I mean, fair. Fair enough.
It's pretty unusual.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if this would have happened under the Trump administration.
Oh yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
But it'd be so hypocritical from Democrats in particular because they don't want Trump involved.
Well,
they don't want Trump talking to his cabinet secretaries. They just want some deep state just running it.
Well, that's what it reminds me of. It's actually kind of an interesting question because in the Trump administration, there were people who wished they weren't operating with the oversight of the president because think of how Trump had.
Everybody tried to avoid him.
He put the CEO of Exxon in charge of the State Department, and then he had John Bolton in the White House. But he also had people who were way more. I'm not saying they are isolationists, but more isolationists, sort of on the spectrum of interventionists to isolationists. And so he constantly had this tug of war happening in his own administration ideologically, and people were playing each other against each other as little pawns to see who could get to the president, to see who could put a crazy article on the president's desk and make John Bolton look bad or whatever it is. And so absolutely it would have happened in the Trump administration because there were people who didn't want Donald Trump to be involved. They didn't want him to oversee what they were doing in foreign policy because then maybe one of the less interventionist people in his administration would try to persuade him to take different steps.
Well, maybe if Biden takes his hand off the Gaza tiller a little bit, there would be less unconditional support for what Israel's doing there.
That's why I think this is interesting because it does have that sort of Trumpian, does the Pentagon want to operate without oversight of the White House? And is this part of sort of giving the White House the middle finger and trying to operate more freely? I don't know, but there's something interesting there. Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.